Hello, my name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and this is for On the Record. We're speaking with my good friend wGar Borras from the Los Angeles-based Guns N' Roses tribute band, Appetite for Destruction. And wGar, today we're picking another album off your Facebook list of albums that really inspired you. And today we're talking about the debut Mott TheHoople album, self-titled. And interestingly enough, this album came out originally November 22nd. In 1969, but at that time it was only released in the United Kingdom, and it would not be released in the United States and other parts of the world for until like a year later, 1970. So we're going back all the way to November of 1969 for this. So let's start off sharing with me about how Mott TheHoople came on your radar.
Well, I was only 14, 15, 16 years old, something like that at that time. And as a young kid, your music, I see it in young kids nowadays where the music becomes part of their whole image and that whole kind of thing. And at a really young age, the whole thing, the T-Rex, the Mott TheHoople, it just kind of has this identity. You see that with the bands that are into goth, the people that are into goth. It becomes part of their identity.
Or even like Kiss or Alice Cooper back in those days, and it's so much to the point where the music is kind of almost secondary to the look and the image.
Yeah, and there was a lot of the kids that I was going to school with at that time that were really, really into music. That was their thing too. And I remember, at a very young age, there was a lot of the same kind of struggle between the more people that are more mainstream, just kind of like doing what society accepts.
Yeah.
Back in those days, the normal kids, which you would call the normal kids that went to school, would be wearing a white T-shirt. This is your classic wardrobe for a kid at that age.
Yeah, yeah.
You're wearing a white T-shirt, Levi jeans, and Converse tennis shoes. That was the normal, with your hair cut short.
Yeah.
And that's what normal kids look like. But the people that were kind of the more rebellious and more into music and doing that whole thing were dressing more influenced by bands and dressing, even the Beatles. There was the bell bottoms jeans that was going on at that time, and so when I would go to school, I would be dressing very differently from the normal kids, and I would be being picked on by the norm. There was a lot of, I got in a lot of fights, and there was a very heavy social pressure that those kids were putting on the ones that were sticking to their guns, what they were really into. And I remember at that time when I was really running into having difficulty because I was getting hassles on a daily basis. There was this one guy that he was in a class or maybe a year or so, maybe even more. I think it was more like about a year older than me.
Yeah.
And he was identifying with what I was doing.
Wow.
And he was another guy like me, that was into music and everything. and I guess he was a tougher kid, and so he took me under his wing, and as soon as I started buddying up with him, these others stopped hassling me.
Oh, wow.
Obviously there was something, where, maybe,
he's with me. He's with me.
There were, you see what was going on. And at that time, the bands that I was into was Mott TheHoople and, T-Rex, Slade, and it was kind of like a thing like that. And, so it's kind of like giving you a little bit of a backdrop of what was going on society-wise at the same time that I was into Mott TheHoople. Now, the crazy thing was I was also into sports just like everybody else.
Wow.
I excelled at sports. I was very good at sports.
What was your sport, if you don't mind me asking? Like, what was the sport you were best at or that you enjoyed the most?
Football and baseball and track.
Wow.
Those were when I was in high school. In my early years of high school, my freshman and my sophomore year, I was year-round sports. Mm-hmm. Start the year playing football, doing it during the summer, before school started, and then after football, I went into track. No, actually, that was wrestling. I went into wrestling. Oh, wow. And I did that, which was absolutely the most difficult sport I ever did. Yeah. And then after that was over, then I did track. So I was a young boy that was had a lot of energy to expend. Yeah. So I but then there were other musicians too that were also into sports. Mark Kendall was probably when I played sports in Little League, Mark Kendall in Little League baseball was the most difficult pitcher to hit off of. He was very, very intimidating. He could throw a mean pitch that was extremly difficult to even get wood on. If I could get a foul tip off of him, I felt good. Wow. So there were other kids that were into sports too, and that whole thing. But that guy that kind of took me under his wing was a guy named Tony Tavalone. Okay. Who eventually went on to become the lead singer for a band that I mentioned in another interview with the Moreland Brothers. Okay. The Moreland Brothers became Wall of Voodoo. Oh, wow. But Tony was singing with them when they were Captain Cosmo and the Sky People.
I love these names. I mean, just the names alone.
Yeah, well, you got to think about the time period because it's the late 60s, early 70s, which is also the late 60s, early 70s when Mott TheHoople was... I don't think that I really discovered Mott TheHoople until about 72-ish, 73-ish, and so there I was kind of a weird one because I would play sports and I would hold my end with the jocks as such, but then I was very unusual from the jocks because I was heavily into music also. It was both of them were very, very important to me. And then by the time I was a sophomore in high school, I had an injury to my leg that I wound up having to have a serious operation where I literally had to have a muscle taken out of my leg. Oh, wow. And so I couldn't run as fast as I used to be able to run. And so I just realized at that time that sports wasn't going to be the thing. So then I just from my junior year on, I just dove headfirst into music.
And let me ask you real quick in regards to that: have you healed from that injury? Or what I'm kind of getting at is when you're up on stage and you're doing your moves on stage, does it affect you at all to this day, or?
No, it never really affected me as far as like moving around and stuff.
Yeah.
It just affected me as far as when I was younger.
Okay.
I no longer could run. I mean, I could still run fast, but when I was really young and I excelled at sports, I could run like really, really fast.
Yeah.
And you know, of course, when you're in sports and you can run really fast, you know, kind of goes hand in hand, you know, to be able to excel in the sports and stuff like that.
Wow.
But they did tell me that when I did get older, that I might have hip problems.
Oh, wow.
Because there was a muscle taken out of my thigh.
Yeah.
And you know, and so now in my older years, I am experiencing, you know, having to use my right hip or my right thigh more carefully to extend, maybe not having to have a hip replacement or something like that, you know what I mean? Because I don't want to have to do something like that. And I haven't reached a point where, you know, anything like that has been necessary, you know. But there are pains that act up now, you know, later on, many years later, because they said that it was going to eventually take its toll on my hip. You know, accumulatively.
Wow.
See what I mean?
Yeah. So getting back to Mott TheHoople, like you, Gar, I've heard a lot of the later hits, and I kind of discovered them later in life as far as my story with Mott TheHoople. But it's amazing because they're one of those bands that should have really been a lot bigger, and you know they were huge in England where they were from, but they never really quite made it here in the United States. Yet at the same time, you always hear a lot of these famous musicians were heavily influenced by. I mean, you could see why. You could see how a guy like Nicky Sixx could be influenced by Mott TheHoople. I mean, he's one of those guys. He's got the look. He's a great songwriter. Motley Crue, you could kind of see that in a lot of their music. Joe Elliott loved Mott TheHoople so much to the point that he's got a little side project. I forget what it's called, but where he's been releasing these albums when Def Leppard's kind of got some downtime and doing like Mott TheHoople covers. Great White, that's another band they did. You know, of course, Once Bitten Twice Shy, which was originally a Mott TheHoople song, and you've probably heard of All the Way from Memphis. That's another big hit they had, and probably my one all-time favorite's got to be The Golden Age of Rock and Roll.
Well, to me, the time period that I had identified with Mott TheHoople the most was with Ian Hunter.
Okay.
Because he wasn't with the band the entire time of the band, but they had their biggest success
with him.
Well, yes, and his style of singing was, very unique, especially at that time in the early 70s. I would say that there's almost a Bob Dylan-ish.
You know what's funny? Let me tell you something I read on the Wikipedia. Like you were saying, Ian Hunter is not an original member now. It was saying the producer who originally got the rest of the band together and was helping them mold their sound, that they were very much influenced by Bob Dylan, oddly enough. And that's why if you listen to this debut album you put on your list, it doesn't sound like typical Mott TheHoople. It sounds like you can see the potential that was there in the band at the time, and you could see what they would later kind of becoming. But it's very interesting because this is a British glam rock band, and the last person you'd really expect a band like that to be influenced by would be Bob Dylan, of all people.
Well, you can hear it in how Ian Hunter sings, that they're just it's not a carbon copy of Bob Dylan, but it has
that influence
ish to it. A little bit of that flavor to it, to how the delivery is done and stuff. And I just loved One of the Boys. That's a song that a lot, they did have some very good success here in the United States during that time.
Yeah, I know they got
back in the early 70s when I was really, really young, in those early teenage years.
Yeah, what I mean is, like you're saying, I even know they got on a big tour in the 70s with Queen, and it's kind of interesting because they had a lot in common with Queen. Queen was a little bigger and it kind of had more success. And like you're right, they had a little bit of success here, but like I said, I think they should have been a lot more huge, and for whatever reason they weren't. But after all these years, we're talking about an album that came out in 1969. Enough people know about who Mott TheHoople were. You've at least heard a few of the hits, So they did kind of leave their mark, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and they during their glam years, they were kind of an image-based band.
Yeah.
Which, when you're young, you're searching for identities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's the reason why you have the punk rockers. That's why you have the goth people, and that stuff was going on when I was really young too. And I was one of those kids that was kind of identifying with, and then you kind of want to adopt a look. And that whole kind of thing. So that's hence. It's kind of weird because I got into these bands when they were really popular, and then they became huge influences on other bands that followed, say like the T-Rexes, and the Slades. A lot. There was Quiet Riot that a number of their big huge hits. A lot of people don't know it, but a number of those big huge hits were actually songs that were done by Slade. 10 years before Quiet Riot ever even started. So you can see how these bands that I was into when I was really, really young, obviously I was onto something by getting into these bands, because I wasn't the only one. There was a lot of other people that went on to by the time they were doing original music themselves, then those influences were coming out too. Which, what was I doing back in the 80s? Doing original music and utilizing a broad range, a very, very broad range of musical influences to be able to pull from to be able to write your own material and stuff. So Motley Crue was a band that was heavily influenced by Mott TheHoople, and it's just a whole list of musicians from the 80s that were heavily influenced by these same bands that I was interested, that were very influential on me. See, that's the whole thing. Most of the people that were posting on Facebook were just posting their favorite albums.
But
for me,
I
wasn't posting my favorite albums. What I was doing was I was posting stuff that was influential on me. Maybe I wasn't. I was in such early musical formulative stages where maybe I wasn't proficient enough to play their music, but I was still very, very into their stuff, and to the point where it became part of me and
who you would become.
Who I was becoming at that time, and the David Bowies during the Ziggy Stardust years, and the bands that I just mentioned, all of those bands were part of that whole identity kind of period of my life.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you, Nikki Sixx, I'm a big fan of what he does, and he wears his love for Mott the Hoople on his sleeve, literally. I mean, all through the years, he's talked about how he was so heavily influenced by them, so much to the point that now, as I sit here and think, I never really thought about this till just now. I'm almost willing to bet Motley is kind of a nod to Mott, who knows? And then when they did that album with John Corabi, there's a song on there called Poison Apples. It's a pretty good kind of like rock anthem type tune, but all throughout the song, but if you listen to the lyrics, it's like, we love Mott the Hoople, and people were probably trying to wonder what does he mean, we love the Mott the Hoople. Well, anybody that is a Mott the Hoople fan, you know exactly what he's talking about.
Absolutely. They were. We were mentioning in other interviews Don Kirshner's rock concert.
Oh yeah.
I was one of those kids sitting at home, staying up late at night, watching that because it came on late at night, because that's the only time the TV would allow them to put stuff like that on.
Yeah.
And Mott TheHoople was another one of those bands that I watched on Don Kirshner's rock concert while they were broadcasting it on KLOS. And just blasting it through. When I was watching Mott TheHoople on Don Kirshner's, my parents were in bed, and I was blasting it so loud through the headphones that my parents they came downstairs to tell me to turn it down. That's how loud I was blasting my ears out. I'm lucky I can still hear these days. I mean, you think about, I was a really young kid and I was blasting my ears out, and all the years that I was playing music, and I was playing music super loud. All the years of playing on stage and doing shows and playing loud. You kind of think about it. It's kind of a miracle that I can still hear. After all these years, and I'm very grateful that I can still hear. But man, I was kind of brutal on my ears.
Wow. And
for a long time.
One thing about Mott the Hoople we're talking about, the one thing about them as a band that I always loved is that was one band you could look at them and they look like rock stars. Even if you weren't a huge fan, you look at that band and you believe they were rock stars, if you know what I mean. They had the look.
Well, and which started that heavy influence on the bands that you were mentioning. We're talking about later on in the 80s that we're mentioning them as influences. I think the whole look thing for a band happened in the United Kingdom 10 years before it ever started becoming a thing over here in the United States.
Oh yeah, because that's where a lot of the glam bands originated, and then like you said, it later kind of they tried to adopt what the British bands were doing. I mean, even bands like the Beatles, they weren't all glammed out, but they even them, like you said, they had the rock star look, so people were into what they were doing, not just
I think say like the New York Dolls was one of the first American bands, one of the first American bands that was starting to adopt this whole glam thing. But that, it started in the United Kingdom much earlier, and then kind of became something over here much later.
Oh yeah, I mean, even I heard in one of these rock documentaries, Lars Ulrich, the drummer from Metallica, was talking about how early on in their career, like that's when Motley was like over in the LA area a lot, and they're big on the LA metal scene, and that's when Motley Crue was coming out at the same time. And he's like, he said, I remember the first time we saw Motley Crue, and we were kind of making the fun of the way they looked, like, oh, these guys are a bunch of what, because they're wearing that makeup and they're all glammed out. And he says, Nicky heard what we were saying, and he chased us, all through the streets of Hollywood, one night, and we're like, okay, we're never gonna mess with that guy again, because it's kind of like you said, there was that punk versus the glam rocker kind of thing going on at the time. It's like, who's more punk, who's more of a rebel, and then you had bands like, even when you start having the thrash bands kind of really break out in a big way. It's like, oh, nobody's more metal than the thrash bands, and there's this big competition going, all through the 70s and 80s with a lot of these bands.
Mm-hmm.
And it's...
Well, there's always, I really kind of hate this tribal thing.
Oh, yeah, I hear you.
But it just seems to be something that's ingrained in many, many societies.
Yeah.
And even as years go by, now, when I was back in the 80s, when somebody referred to metal, it could be anything from hard rock like Van Halen, to hair band stuff like Poison, to Metallica stuff like you see what I'm saying? Metal was considered such a broad range.
Oh yeah.
And then nowadays, you talk to people that are into metal, and there's so many subdivisions.
Oh.
I can't. It just becomes a blur to me.
Yeah.
How many subdivisions that now. Are under the metal moniker, and they're all considered separate. Oh, I'm not into this, but I'm into this, and I'm not into that, but I'm into this.
It's like people used to say, you can't be a Poison fan and be a metalhead, metal is like Black Sabbath, Metallica, Motorhead, all the way, and
and it's such a I guess there's nothing you can do about it, because society's going to do whatever they're going to do. But for me, I just looked at music. I looked at
kind of what gets
tribal as limiting.
Kind of whatever gets you up, in the sense of like, I'm as big of a Black Sabbath fan as I am a Motley Crue fan. Or I'm as and I also can listen to stuff like Tom Petty or the Eagles. And I'll tell you why, because to me, what gets me off is if I listen to a song and it's got a nice beat, it's uplifting. If it and a lot of times too, like a lot of these bands we're discussing. But one thing they all have in common is they're all great songwriters. All these bands have songs and albums that have stood the test of time. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about them 30 or 40 years later,
Yes. And to only be into one thing.
Yeah. How disappointing.
It's so limiting. It's so narrow-minded. And for me, it just never seemed beneficial to limit yourself to just one area. Simply because if you're stuck in one area, my whole thing was trying to become the best that I could be. And if you're going to be well-rounded as a musician, you need to expose yourself to many, many different things. And I don't think that I was alone in those kind of things, because I used to read about Randy Rhoads. Part of the reason why Randy Rhoads became such a great guitarist was because of how much diversity that he exposed himself to.
I mean, he started out as a classical musician, learning classical music.
Yes, but he was, even when he was working with Ozzy, he was always still, exposing himself to other types of music and other types of influences to try to take those other things and have them become influential towards what he does.
Yeah, and see, the thing about
always adding new things and always adding new things, and I looked at it in very much the same way.
Wow.
This whole tribal thing is very narrow-minded and very limiting, and there's way more to life than one thing or one point of view or one, just only exposing yourself to one, thing. And, for me, during this whole young time period when I was really young, back in the early 70s, for some reason I was lucky enough to not get trapped into those kind of things.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting you bring up Randy Rhoads, because think of the huge legacy that guy has left behind. And if you stop and think about it, he only did those 2 Ozzy albums. I mean, he did a couple albums with Quiet Riot, but they were only released in Japan. A lot of people haven't heard them. You can hear some of it if you go on YouTube. But if you listen to what he did with Quiet Riot and Ozzy, they're like almost 2 different worlds, like you're saying. And there was talk that if he had lived, that he'd actually been talking to people that he was considering to leave Ozzy and kind of do his own classical music thing. It would have been interesting to see, what kind of career he had. But just think about that for a minute. The guy died so tragically young, and he really just did those 2 Ozzy albums, and he still has such a huge following just with those 2 albums. And that's amazing to be able to do something like that.
Well, there was friends of mine that I was hanging around with on the day that he passed away.
Wow.
And I was in heaven, because on the radio they were playing just nonstop Randy Rhoads Ozzy stuff, and I was just like going, "Oh my gosh, this is so awesome!"
And then you hear the news.
I didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
But my friends that were with me at the time knew that he had passed away, but because I was in such heaven on that day, because they were playing so much of it,
I hear you.
They didn't have the heart to tell me.
Wow.
And so they were keeping their mouths shut.
Wow.
And not telling me, and just allowing me to just enjoy listening to nonstop Randy Rhoads Ozzy stuff being played on the radio. And then all of a sudden it came on, the radio announcer, finally I was paying attention. And the guy goes, announced that Randy had passed away in that airplane crash. So my friends didn't have the heart to tell me on the day that he passed away.
That says something about your friends, I guess. In a good way.
But anyways, back to Mott TheHoople. A lot of people don't know that Mick Ralphs, the guitarist for Mott TheHoople, actually left Mott TheHoople and started Bad Company with Paul Rogers.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. See? Yeah, I had my mind all on this Mott TheHoople stuff, but that's so true, yeah.
Another part of history was, a lot of people don't know that, just another part of the history of Mott TheHoople that became a huge part. Everybody knows Bad Company.
Oh, yeah, take that to the next level. I mean, everybody who's a Paul Rogers fan knows before there was ever a Bad Company, there was Free, but interestingly enough, Bad Company became just a little bigger,
A little bit bigger, but I was well aware of Free.
Yeah.
When Paul Rogers was in, and I loved All Right Now.
Yeah.
That was that guitar riff for All Right Now is one of those quintessential classic
riffs.
Guitar riffs.
Yeah. I mean, almost right up there, I'd say, with probably the top two riffs would be "Stairway to Heaven" by Led Zeppelin. Of course, I think everybody's agreed number one have to be "Smoke on the Water."
Oh, absolutely. If I had a nickel for everybody that that was the first riff that they ever learned how to play on a guitar. "Smoke on the Water." And but there's a whole history of Mott the that a lot of people don't know. The original guitarist for Mott the left the band and started Bad Company with Paul Rogers.
Oh wow!
And
I must thank you.
Another whole historic thing that went on, in rock history too.
Wow! I got to thank you, Gar, for bringing that up.
There's a lot of depth to the band Mott the Hoople.
And I got to thank you for bringing that up, because I myself almost would have left that out of the conversation. I was so focused on learning what I could on Mott the Hoople today, and I think once you get past the look and Mott the Hoople, let's be honest, like I said, that's part of the appeal. They were all glammed out. They did indeed look like rock stars, but interesting enough, I think what really, when I think about the Hoople, what stands out to me besides the look and having that rock star look is the songs. I mean, what great songwriters they were. I mean, even going, which I got to tell you, I love the fact that you put this album on your list, because I was more familiar with some of the later, bigger hits that you hear on the radio still to this day. But it's almost like listening to a new album that that was released, for the first time, and you can hear, if you listen to all the songs. I listened to the tracks, like going on YouTube, checking it out, and they were cool tracks. But if you'd never heard this stuff before, like me, before listening to today, you kind of got a fresh understanding of it, And the thing is, you could see the potential that was in the band as far as the songwriting. And we were talking about how they were influenced by Bob Dylan. And oddly enough, they also on this album, they have two cover tunes. One is the Kinks, of course, "You Really Got Me," and then they have another one, oddly enough, a Sonny and Cher song, if you can believe that, called "Laugh at Me." And I listened to the original Sonny and Cher version, and it sounds kind of almost identical. But just think about a British glam rock band picking of all people to cover Sonny and Cher. I mean, how cool is that? They're kind of turning people onto that.
Sonny didn't get the credit due for his songwriting abilities. That was the thing about Sonny. Most people that just know the surface of all of that just knew Sonny as back in the day, he was the guy with the long hair that wore the hippie vest without a shirt on.
The crazy looking mustache and all that. But he was really the brains behind it.
But he was actually the songwriting force behind Sonny and Cher. Cher was the marketable part of it. Because she had a beautiful voice and she was not too shabby to look at. She was a very beautiful, incredibly beautiful woman. But it was Sonny that was the actual musical force behind Sonny and Cher.
That's amazing. And now you mentioned to me that you're what a huge Kinks fan you were, and I don't know if you've heard the version that Mott the Hoople did off of this album, but talk a little bit about that. I mean, the fact that Mott the Hoople would cover a song like that.
I got to see the Kinks in concert. I bought tickets with my friends, saving lunch money. And guess who was opening for the Kinks?
Mott the Hoople?
I don't know if I've mentioned this before.
Wow. No, I don't know if you. I don't think you have.
Done with you. The band. This is way before they became popular.
Okay.
This is when this particular band put out their first album, which is one of my favorite albums by them.
Okay.
Cheap Trick.
Oh wow. Okay. Cheap
Trick was, and the bass player wasn't playing the 12-string basses at that time.
But it was still early on in his
He was playing a 4-string Firebird bass at that time.
Wow.
And so yeah, it was the original Cheap Trick when they were touring, opening for the Kinks, and actually supporting their first album that they had put out.
Yeah, I think I told you this before in regards to Cheap Trick. Now, like everybody, you probably heard the live version of "I Want You to Want Me" off of Budokan, but I dare you to go on YouTube and like find the original studio version. It sounds like a totally different song, almost like a swampy country song. It's worth checking out. Just kind of.
But I highly recommend anybody that is curious about Cheap Trick. Their first album is absolute. Clock Strikes 10.
Oh yeah.
Just a plethora of great songs.
Oh yeah, L.O. Kitties. They got a bunch.
L.O. Kitties.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean
all of this stuff. That was just a great album. And when I was first getting my feet wet doing a tribute band, that was the first tribute band that I did. Was a tribute to Cheap Trick called Dream Police.
Oh wow, yeah. We talked about that before.
I was bleaching my hair blonde and doing the Robin Zander thing, wearing a suit and tie on stage, looking all nice and like a rock and roll, you know how Robin Zander could take a suit and tie and still make it look rock.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. The guy's almost 70 years old now, and he still looks like a rock star. I mean,
yeah, great singer, and but you were asking about the Kinks.
Yeah.
And they were great songwriters.
Yeah.
Just like Alice Cooper, great songs that tell
stories.
stories.
Yeah.
And that was the big thing about the Kinks, is they wrote songs that told stories.
Yeah.
I just love the song "Celluloid Heroes."
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because when you actually listen to that song, it tells a great, to me, because I was a young kid before I got into music, I used to be into when I got too old for cartoons, I got into watching black and white movies and black and all of this stuff that was on TV, and movies and TV shows were the new thing back in the 60s, because the TVs were when I was a young kid, TVs were in black and white.
Oh wow! Now let me ask you, in some regards to old black and white films like that, like let's take something like King Kong. The original film, as you know, was originally in black and white. What are your feelings?
That movie.
What are your feelings?
Absolutely, to this day, I can still watch that movie, and I still love that movie, King Kong.
And I was going to ask, what are your feelings like when they go and they colorize something that was originally black and white, and they try to kind of update it and make it more modern?
Well, they've gotten so good at colorizing that you can't even tell it's been colorized.
Yeah, like they did the other King Kong with, I think, Peter Jackson, and I thought it was all right. It was kind of a different take on it, but
my favorites, all of my favorites are the originals.
Oh yeah.
The original King Kong, the original Dracula,
Frankenstein,
Lugosi. All of my personal favorites are the ones that started the whole thing.
There you go.
When I went through a long a period where I was into Humphrey Bogart movies.
Oh wow. Yeah, I can see that.
All of the the guys, how they used to talk in those movies. There was a whole delivery of dialogue that was really popular in how people used to talk in those movies. And there was a whole, Maltese Falcon. Loved that movie. The Big Sleep. Oh my gosh, I loved whodunit movies.
Do you remember?
Where it was a mystery.
Do you remember The Fly or The Thing, the original Thing, Swamp Creature? Yeah, well, that was all. That was classic movie days. But Now you were mentioning like when you had the Dream Police.
I loved the Bob Hope, Bing Crosby
Christmas specials,
movies.
yeah. Oh wow.
All of that stuff was, that's my childhood before I became into music.
Wow.
And I don't know how we got on this whole subject, but it's because of the Kinks. That was the whole thing about Celluloid Heroes, the song Celluloid Heroes, and why that song is so special to me is because they're talking about all of those people in those movies, because they, when I was young and you went down the Walk of Fame, it wasn't, what it is now. It's just, it was a small stretch of the Walk of Fame, and getting your star put, down in the Walk of Fame was a huge deal. And so if you had your star there, you had to have a huge amount of achievement to actually get the star there.
Oh yeah, that's why
it seems like later on it became something that could be bought.
Oh yeah.
But back in the original times, all of the people that got their stars in the Walk of Fame, it was because of their huge achievement, and that's what the Celluloid Heroes is all about. Is all of these people, even people that preceded in before talkies.
Oh yeah, and it's amazing with the what it is now. That's why it kind of scares me here in California when the governor says, well, I don't know if we're ever going to open movie theaters again. I'm like, come on, you got to be kidding. I mean,
well, right now it's because we're in uncharted territory and nobody really knows. Who can say? But I can say this. I don't want to go into the political arena, but I can say this: there are going to be changes that have occurred now because of this. That those changes are going to become the norm. Say like shopping online and having things delivered.
More and more people are doing it.
That's going to become the norm. Previous to being locked down, you went to the store if you needed something.
You went to a shopping mall.
You just got in your car, and you went to the store and you bought it. But nowadays, the online, we've reached a pivotal change that's occurring because of 2020. Some of them are negative, and some of them could turn out to be very positive things in the future. We don't know. I don't have a crystal ball.
I hear you.
I can tell you this: there are pivotal changes that have occurred that from now on,
the new norm.
Those are going to become the norm. But anyways, getting back to the Kinks, they were great storyteller. That was the thing about they were such. Whenever you listen to any song by the Kinks, it's a story that's being told. That's also what I gravitated towards Alice Cooper, because this is when he became hugely popular. When I was a kid, it was before he became the theatrics. What does that say about his songs? They told stories, and that's then again Mott TheHoople. They were great. You go on into a lot of these other people. They were great songwriters. They told stories with their songs. And so that's the beauty of being a kid at my time.
And and at that time there's also a certain more of an innocence in the sense that we didn't have the internet back in the day, so you probably at the time didn't know that how much Ray Davies and his brother hated each other, or they kind of kept that on the down low. But it's kind of interesting because if you look at how many people a band like the Kinks influence, a lot of times a lot of the famous guitar players cite them as a influence for whatever reason. But it has been said over years, like two guys like that sad that they're brothers and they had so much hate for one another. Their relationship kind of fell apart. But you hear some oftentimes when they're feuding band members that it makes for beautiful music.
Well, some of the most incredible artists of all time are tortured souls.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah.
So, unfortunately, they're tortured souls, or they have tortured relationships.
Is our entertainment.
And things of that. But there's some of those things become the birth of beautiful art.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think part of the reason for that is, if you think about it, because these songs are like pages out of their lives. They're telling us through their music their kind of life story, and it's, to me, when you listen to music and it's a song based on somebody's actually experienced, as opposed to something they've just kind of read an article in the newspaper and kind of just got an idea to write a song. I think it's much more touching because it's actually a page out of somebody's life, if you know what I mean.
Well, but that goes even pre that. I mean, Woody Guthrie. That's what is he doing? Telling stories that are about very personal experiences.
Wow. Yeah.
The storytelling songwriter wasn't, all of these people in these bands that I appreciated went during my time period, they were influenced by predecessing artists before before my time, people that I don't even know about that were heavy influences on them.
Oh yeah, I mean, people may be surprised to actually hear that the Beatles have actually bands that came before them that influenced them. They're like, the Beatles? I thought they influenced everybody. Yeah, they did, but they're actually people that came before them. That influenced what they were doing.
Yes, and it's a torch that gets passed on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I still, I just know that nobody can predict the future.
Oh, nobody, none of us can do that.
But I still feel that music is not done metamorphosizing into what is going to become something that becomes hugely popular, that's hugely influential, and so I still feel that music is not done.
Oh, yeah,
music is still going through a transitional period, and
like, I will say this.
There's one thing, you can have all kinds of oppressive societies.
Yeah.
But you can oppress people as much as you want. But there's still art. Art is like a weed in a cracked piece of pavement.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. But here's the thing. Back in the time when we're talking, I mean, there were a whole bunch of great bands. I mean, to me, best music comes like from the 70s, 80s, even 60s, and I think that's just was kind of the when the rock star was still alive. I don't think rock is dead, but we don't have as many bands like we did back in the day that were of that caliber. Probably there's very few of them, but when they come around, they come around. Probably the latest band I kind of think that's got a huge potential. I mean, they've already got a huge fan base. Is like the Dead Daisies. I mean, they have they had John Corabi. He's a great singer. But see, the Dead Daisies. They got a unique sound. They kind of were influenced by, that 70s rock sound. And it's not even about necessarily who's in the band, because I love John Corabi, but now they got Glenn Hughes. Glenn Hughes has got he's a great singer in his own right. But They got that.
Goes all the way back to the 70s.
Oh yeah, Deep Purple, and what I loved about that time with Deep Purple, Ian Gillan had left, You know, and they got David Coverdale, they got Glenn Hughes, and the two of them together, like their voices. When like if you put on that Burn album, first thing they ever did with Deep Purple, I mean, just listen to the sound of Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale. I mean, it was something magic.
Yeah, that's Fireball is a fireball of an album.
Oh yeah. But
you know, and you know, so you know, music is not done, and music is eventually going to metamorphosize into something. You know, you're always going to have young, rebellious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, when you have young rebellion, that is the critical element. That is the breeding ground for whatever is going to become the next thing.
Yeah.
You know, you're never going to stop art.
Yeah.
You can have a cracked piece of pavement, and a weed's a dandelion is gonna bloom.
Yeah.
You know, out of that.
I love it.
And you know, you can have you can have as much as you want to. But you're always going to have young people that are just going to look at the norm and say, you know what? You know, I'm not going to follow this norm.
Yeah.
You know, you know, you know, I'm going to reject the norm. You know what I mean?
And follow my own path, like, you know.
Make up my own mind as to what, you know, and that's where new things breed from.
Oh yeah, that reminds me, like back in the early '90s when grunge all of a sudden hit and everybody started like throwing away. I'm gonna throw away
rejecting the hair bands.
I'm gonna throw away all my Motley Crue albums. All of a sudden they suck because grunge is a new flavor of a month. And you know, even the grunge bands, there were some bands like Nirvana and Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, great sounding bands that came out of that time, but you know, there's only a handful of them, and you know, all those bands like Motley Crue and you know, Rat and Poison, everybody want to, you know, throw those albums out of their record collection. I'll tell you what, those bands are still around all these years later because of the fan base they have. Because you know, Poison, I think today is just as good musically as they were 20 years ago. I mean, they're one of those bands. They look the part. They got great songs, and that's all you really need. So because something's, you know, the latest flavor of a month, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to throw out your record collection.
Well, you know, see, I think that's one of the things that you know, say the songwriting of Poison doesn't really get credit for.
Oh yeah,
that was their strong point.
Again, yeah, that's why
that was their strong point. You know, they wrote good songs, and you can't tell me that the predecessing generations of bands that told stories in their songs weren't an influence on that.
Oh yeah. You know, before we wrap this up, Gar, because I got to tell you, once again, you got your finger right on the pulse of music, history, and music, what's going on in the world today. But it's interesting. Like, I wanted to talk about Mott the Hoople not just because you included this album on your list, but I thought, again, I'm aware of who they are, and I was always kind of, you know, just in awe that they were not a lot bigger. I mean, they had such potential. Now, let's be honest, they have a legacy they left, and enough people know who Mott the Hoople are. But let me ask you, okay, you could have included other Mott the Hoople albums on your list, but you included the debut album from 1969. Why, you know, what was it about this album kind of influenced you, and why do you think when people think of Mott the Hoople, more people don't, you know, include this on their list, if you will?
Well, you know, to be honest with you, I was just mentioning Mott the Hoople. I wasn't singling out a single album.
Oh, I hear you. Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know.
What I was basically doing was I was just mentioning Mott the Hoople because realistically, it was you know, the two albums that had Ian Hunter as the lead vocalist, because that's, you know, I mean, to this day, I guarantee you All the Young Dudes, that particular song, you're going to hear it either in a commercial or you're going to hear it in a part of a movie as a backdrop to a scene or even a TV show. That song, to this day, still, brings back kind of one of those longing, for that time. For me, and it just has staying power. There's no way that you can't, in that chorus where it goes from the chorus out. There's no. To me, it's impossible to not want to sing along with that.
Oh yeah. Now let me ask you, because like I was sharing with you, I like some of the more like glam rock type stuff they did, like All the Way to Memphis, Once Bitten Twice Shy, Golden Age of Rock and Roll. But you're right, that's one of the songs people always, when they talk about Mott TheHoople, they always talk about All the Young Dudes. Now, was that one of the first songs you ever heard by the band? I was kind of curious as the fact that it was,
All the Way to Memphis, that was, that stuff was being played on the radio a lot too, and I loved all of that stuff because All the Way to Memphis is kind of one of those, somebody puts it on, come on, let's get up and dance.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you, the final thing I'll say on this, especially this particular album, we were talking about the debut album. I mean, not only were they great songwriters, but I dare you look on any Mott TheHoople album, just the song titles. Like, on this one, okay, for example, they got At the Crossroad, Backsliding Fearlessly, Rock and Roll Queen, Half Moon Bay, Raff and Roll. I mean, just the titles sound cool, you know what I mean? And the fact that they always had such a great play on words, and the lyrics I always love. The lyrics you can almost put on any Mott TheHoople song, and you're gonna have some cool lyrics.
Well, you had to be good at what you were doing. Back in those days, because if you weren't, a wizard, on your, in as far as like. Incredible musicianship abilities, then you better be really good at writing songs.
Oh wow, yeah.
And it was the bar was set very high in both of those areas, and then you had bands that made wonderful careers off of their songwriting abilities.
And see, that's the thing.
That's the thing about the Beatles. Their songwriting abilities. None of the guys in the Beatles were virtuosos on their instruments.
Songwriting wise, though, that's what they're remembered for.
When you take those four guys and you put them in a room together, look at the magic at how they just churned out so many great, memorable songs. And then that's the same thing with a band like Mott TheHoople.
Oh yeah.
They were nothing to take away from them in their musicianship, but they were very good musicians, but they weren't virtuosos.
They were songwriters.
But you put them in a room together, and they churned out so many really good songs. And that doesn't end. That goes all the way into even bands like Poison.
Oh yeah.
They're not virtuosos, but they've churned out some great songs.
Oh yeah, I mean, Poison and Mott TheHoople, the one thing they have in common, I will say, is their songwriting. In a sense, how many Poison songs or Mott TheHoople songs can you not tell me have a great catchy beat? Very uplifting, and people, people pay attention to that stuff. Those are the songs we remember. And the final thing I'm going to say before we wrap this up is, you mentioned the Beatles, a perfect example of what great songwriting they were. Is you take a song like Helter Skelter. I mean, that's as metal as you can get. And oddly enough, I say Helter Skelter.
Way before metal too.
And I say Helter Skelter. How many people are going to listen to this think that's a Motley Crue song? No, folks. The Beatles did it before Motley Crue.
Yeah, was, but there's a whole history to that song that's very dark.
Oh yeah, and we could possibly get into that because a few weeks from now we are going to be talking about the Beatles. But Gar, as usual, you got your pulse right on history of music. So I want to thank you for doing this again, and it's been a lot of fun. Anything else you want to say before we wrap it up?
Just, I wish everybody out there to stay safe and healthy and love everyone, because no matter what their point of view is, let's all just respect each other
and get along.
I think one of the things that's getting lost these days is respect, and just saying, hey, you have the right to your point of view.
Hey, neighbor.
That's being lost right now. I love everyone. My care for everyone
genuine.
has no bearing on your point of view.
I love that. I'm with you there.
Let's just respect each other's point of view, and allow each other to have their point of view.
There you go.
Not allowing their point of view to create divisions amongst us, because we are all human beings. We all bleed red blood. We are all, we all love our families. We love our, family members, our cousins. We're all Americans.
We're all in it together.
We are all put on this world together, and the worst thing that we can do, or we can allow to happen to each other, is to allow for divisions to occur. We need to instead of yelling at each other and just allowing ourselves to reduce each other down to sound bites and catchphrases, let's just take a deep breath and just say, you know what? I respect your point of view.
There you go.
You have the right to your point of view. And just allow each other to have those point of views instead of arguing about them.
And we'll end on these 3 words going all the way back to the 60s. Peace, love, flower power, people. And we'll be seeing you next time. Thanks so much, Gar. I'll be talking to you.
Thank you so much.
Hey, bye-bye.
Take care, Jason.